Good morning, Easton. Good morning, Ray. Good morning, Peyton. Good morning, Brantavian. And good morning, Torin. Good morning, Vincent and Giselle. And good morning, Alejandro. Good morning, Ashley. We are going to wait a few more minutes, but while we're waiting, those of you who are already here, please message me in chat the play that you are going to watch for your RPA paper. Okay? All right. So please message me in chat the play that you are going to watch. Yep, you were supposed to pick before today, so you need to pick right now. I told you on Wednesday, right? Okay. So please message me in chat what play you're going to watch for your RPA paper. Okay. All right. Those of you who are just joining us, I need to hear from you what play you're going to watch for your RPA paper. All right, got some good choices here. The list is in the assignments. It's in the assignment, so. So check the assignment in Schoology, but remember I told you on Wednesday you needed to have your, Torin, which one? You just told me T. Which one are you gonna watch? Okay, all right.
All right, guys, we're gonna go ahead and get started. So this class is pretty similar to other classes. I kind of like using the PowerPoint myself.
Okay, Peyton, all right. Okay, thank you.
But regardless, this class is the content run.
Yes, you can, Ray.
Before I get going on any other announcements, if you want to join AP, I have put the class code on there. Today is the registration deadline for regular registration. If you decide you want to join later, there is a late registration. You just come with, I think, a $4 fee.
Are you, Adam Maris, it needs to be the musical version. It can't be a movie, okay? So you can't watch the version that just came out with like Judi Dench and all of them. You can watch okay, as long as it's on the playlist. So that should be, I don't think it's actually the movie. I think it's the version that's on stage.
The way me and Chastain teach year one of AP history is essentially what we do for AP US history, what we've done in the past. Only difference is we focus on DP skills rather than AP skills. So I would say we prepare you a little less than Winter does, maybe because we don't really do a lot more choice.
Vincent, it is not the same version.
That being said, though, it's the same content. You learned all the skill classes whenever the essays I did.
I mean, it's the same cast, but the one that's on Disney Plus has editing that the one that's in the playlist does not.
So if you feel like you're decent with history, or if you even pass the
miss somebody. Oh, Alejandro's.
No reason why you can register and cancel later too. Yeah, so it's totally up to you.
Yes, Easton it is, but you cannot watch the one on Disney Plus. You have to watch the one that's in that playlist. So it's up to you. If you want to switch, let me know.
So homework for next class are pages 285 to 298 in AMSCO, as well as the PDF pages.
So I still haven't heard from a few of you. I need you to tell me what play you are going to watch for your RPA paper. Yes, you can. So what play are you going to watch for your RPA paper? I need to know.
Okay, so we are going over westward expansion, or just expansion in general during this period. Like I said, this is going to be pretty much an overview, more of me talking than I'd like, but I will have questions for you, so definitely pay attention. So we haven't talked about this concept a lot this year, but manifest destiny. What is that idea? What is this manifest destiny thing?
Alejandro, I don't think that the one that you sent me is the whole musical. So you're going to have to check to see if all the parts are listed somewhere. I think it's, it is, but it's in 50 parts, just so you're aware.
But there's a key word, if you can see my screen right here. This word, a divine mission. What is a divine mission?
So I need to know what musical you're going to watch for your RPA paper. I have not heard from, yes, you can, Alejandro.
Exactly. It was their right to expand. And also, like, it was the mission, like, it was there being good Christian United States citizens to expand. We're going to bring God to this uncivilized world. There's a lot more to it to that. We're going to be reading some of that later. But when you see a lot of Americans moving further west and south, a lot of it's going to be based on this. So some of the territories we're going to be looking at are Maine, Oregon, and Texas. Again, since we're really just doing this as background for DP history.
So I'm waiting on Brantavian. Let's see. Ingrid isn't here. I'm waiting on Giselle. I'm waiting on Ray. Cash isn't here. I need to hear from Bennett, and I need to hear from Navi. Okay, so you're gonna do Oklahoma. All right. Yeah, I need you to tell me. I know you're here. I need you to tell me, guys, you got to pay attention. I need you to tell me what musical that you're going to watch for your RPA paper. That's what I'm waiting for. Remember, I told you on Wednesday you needed to make a decision and bring it with you to class. Well, this is your moment. I need you to tell me what you've decided on. So I'm waiting on Brantavian, Giselle, Ray, Navi, and Bennett. I need to hear from you guys about what play you're going to watch. You were supposed to already have this picked out, guys. All right. Thank you, Navi. All right. Thank you, Ray. Brantavian, Giselle, and Bennett. We're waiting on the three of you. And we can move on.
So regardless, you're going to see a lot of issues within Texas, and you'll eventually have a revolt in Texas.
There's Ingrid.
War, independence from Mexico. Almost immediately, Texas starts seeking annexation to the United States.
Ingrid, I need to hear from you what musical you are going to write your RPA paper on. Okay, Giselle, I got to get that information. So you got to find it. It's on the list. So go ahead and find it. This was basically your homework, so.
Yeah. So that was one big one. We already had a political divide, and the Whigs who say no to Republicans. I see what you're getting at there, but we're for different parties. But yeah, it would increase one.
I don't have a lot more of time that I can wait for this. So I need Brantavian, Ingrid, Giselle, Bennett. Send me the name of the musical that you are going to write your paper on, please. So we can move on.
Another issue is they just got
Friends, this was your homework, okay? When I tell you to do something, you need to do it so that, you know, you're ready to just submit the information. I told you on Wednesday that that's what I needed you to do before today. It is, the list is in the assignment. Class content, very bottom, has the list. It's in the musical paper assignment. It says musical theater paper, MYP Theater 1. The list is in there. We've got to move on. You guys need to find your musical while we are talking about early American theater. So we're finally in the US. Obviously, the US creates their own theater much later than everyone else. Why is that? What's the reason? What are you talking about, Ingrid? I need to know the name of the play that you're going to watch.
So it was trying to say we either get this border that we want in Oregon further north than what we end up getting, or we're going to
Okay. So what's the reason why we get American theater much later than every other country? Yeah, right? Exactly. It's not a trick, right? It's just America's not a country, right? Now, when we say, I want you guys to be careful about when you're talking about it wasn't discovered, because what does that mean? What's the implication of that? Because I've seen this a couple of times when we talked about Germany and now we've talked about America. We talk about countries being, quote, discovered. What's the problem with that? Okay, Brantavian, thank you. Okay, Giselle, thank you. So I'm waiting on Ingrid and Bennett. So what's the problem with saying that a country hadn't been discovered yet?
I like the story of the immediate cause of the war, so there's a lot of tension here. The president sends an army down south to try to get part of the border with
Okay, yes, thank you. Yes, because people were already living there. It already had people, right? It just hadn't been colonized, okay? So I just want to, remind you, and we're going to talk about this right here, that when we say that, a country hadn't been discovered, it's really that it had not yet been discovered by Europeans usually, right? Okay. Bennett, you're the last one I'm waiting on for a play. So we're going to talk about early North American theater, starting with theater of indigenous people. Then we'll talk about pre and post-colonial theater. We're going to specifically talk about a big event in early American theater called the Astor Place riots. And then I want to talk a little bit about early racial groups in American theater. So here's my point. Why I say be careful when you talk about, that it hadn't been discovered yet. Theater in North America did not begin with white people, okay? There was theater in North and South America long before it was colonized, okay? Now, as you're gonna see, one of the first things that the colonizers are going to do is try to disrupt that theater, right? We saw the same thing when we talked about Indian drama, about how, it was destroyed because the people who were trying to take over the country were trying to prevent them from being able to share their stories and talk about their religious beliefs. Same thing's going to happen in North America. Okay. Mario, can you read this slide for us, please?
Indigenous theater in North America ritualized performances, including songs and dances, passed down tales of history and mythological stories. Governments suppressed / banned these performances to weaken the communities. Some versions of these resurface in entertainment for white audiences. Think Buffalo Bill. You can still see indigenous performances in North America, although some are invite only.
Very good. So this is a big thing to think about. Okay, now where have we seen this before? Theater that was passing down tales of history and mythological stories. What other countries have done that? What countries used theater for that?
The majority of people, this opens up a lot of new farmland. You will see a lot of people move out west for that. It wasn't a very pretty life. Next time we talk about the West, we're going to show some pictures and stuff to talk about it. Just some background. A lot of
Yes. Okay. Mario says Greece, ancient Rome to some extent. Where else? Theater was passing down tales of history and mythological stories. Yes, India. Good. Okay. Very good. So we've seen this quite a few places, right? Where the theater was meant to really be a way for these stories to be passed down from generation to generation. So, of course, just like what happened with, with Indian theater, even to a large degree with Greek theater, when they were sort of colonized by the Europeans, the government wanted to suppress these performances. They banned them, right? The whole purpose of that is to try to make it harder for the indigenous communities to really sort of keep morale up, to keep people, from discussing their heritage. It didn't work in a lot of communities. They still sort of tried to privately keep it alive, but for a while it was very underground. It couldn't be done publicly. Eventually, some of these indigenous communities are going to bring these back. Now, have you guys ever heard of Buffalo Bill? Do you know who that is? Sort of the whole idea of the Wild West show. There's a picture of it. You guys ever heard of this before? Mostly knows? Okay. So these were basically these open air shows where they would play essentially like early Westerns, right? Like cowboys and Indians, pretty much, except it was real indigenous people playing. And I'm using cowboys and Indians because that's what they called it, not, that's the right term for it. So the indigenous people sort of made their parts of their theater into a performance for white audiences to make money, right? Because they were really struggling, and people were interested in not so much the history of the indigenous communities, but how it looked and sounded, right? So they ended up using it to make money for their communities. Now, obviously, some of these still exist, right? Some are invite only, some they welcome other people, to come and watch. But this was really how theater began in North America. Any questions about this before we move on? Sorry, I don't have a Nearpod for this one. I didn't have time to make any fun Nearpod stuff. No questions? We understand? Okay. I will take your silence as a yes. Okay, so the first scripted play that we can trace sort of back in North America is actually performed in Canada. And it was called The Theater of Neptune. So it's actually it's a pretty weird little play where you have all these chieftains of the indigenous people who are swearing allegiance to the governor. And then the governor invites his friend, the god Neptune. And the god Neptune is like, wow, good job swearing allegiance to my friend, the governor. Now I'm going to throw us a big banquet. So it's a very weird, it's a very weird play. And obviously it's meant to really like be encouraging the indigenous people to do what the European colonists wanted them to do. Let's see. How about Peyton? Can you read this slide for us?
Religion. Many early colonists were
Puritans?
Puritans who were fleeing for religious purposes. They believed that theater was sinful and was not something that Christ or his followers should engage in.
Good.
Anti-British theater was very popular in British in America, was trying to make a name for itself. It was also trying to resist the influence of British literature. Some theaters even get torn down, and British troops come there to put on a show.
Good. Okay. Thank you. So America is actively resisting theater. Why? So on the one hand, we have this puritanical movement because the Puritans, you know, are looking for religious freedom and they don't agree with theater. They think that theater is, you know, sinful. The second reason why, if you weren't sort of ascribed to that religion, is that, you know, that theater was super popular in Britain and the Americans were trying to separate themselves both like culturally and actually like physically and politically from Britain, right? So since a lot of these plays were being imported from Britain, they didn't want that, to the point where, yeah, there were lots of theaters where if they announced that they were going to bring a British company in to do a play, that they would like riot and tear the theater down, like literally tear the building down. Pretty extreme reaction, don't you think? No? You think that's a totally like regular old response? Hello? Are you guys okay? Yes, but understandable. Okay, so why do you say it's understandable? I'm curious to hear that. The question is, do you think that this is a reasonable response to this idea that if to tearing down a theater because they're going to like a British troupe was going to put on a play? No? Why not? We've got yes, that it was understandable, and we've got somebody who's saying no, it's not understandable. Okay, so it's an extreme message to send to Britain, okay? I can see where you're coming from there, Zion. You're right. They definitely wanted Britain to know how they felt about them. Well, didn't they, Vincent? You're talking about the British people like in the troop did nothing wrong, or you're talking about the British country? I mean, the actors. Okay, yes, it's definitely not their fault, right? But they're tearing down a theater that's not necessarily owned by the British, too, right? They're tearing down a theater that's presumably owned by another colonist. You're going to see that this is when we talk about the Astor Place riots, this is something that happens like kind of often. There's definitely a lot of tense moments, right? And it's partially due to the fact that, as I'm sure some of you know, that we had a lot of people who were sympathizers to the British who wanted to remain part of England, right? Loyalist, yes, thank you, Zion. My brain could not come up with that word. So we definitely had a lot of people who were loyalists. So that tension comes out a lot around the theater because there's not really an American, like an established American theater yet. So if you did want to go see the theater at first, you kind of had to go see theater that was done by British actors, okay? So the first play in America we can trace back to 1665. And it is called Ye Bear and Ye Cub, that was performed at a tavern in Virginia. So how do we know that this happened? Well, we actually know because what we have are the court documents from this. It was the first play performed like an original American play performed in America. Good question, Mario. So we know this because of the court documents, because the writer was actually accused of public wickedness for putting on this play. And in order to like defend the play, they actually brought the whole troupe of actors to the courtroom and they had to perform the play in costume for the judge. And the writer was found not guilty. So what do you guys think about that? That's pretty wild, isn't it? So yeah, but that's how we have it documented, that it actually, yeah, he was arrested. Yep, they had to put on the whole play in front of the judge so the judge could decide if the play actually encouraged wickedness, because that's what he was accused of. So that gives you some insight into sort of how seriously a lot of the people, the religious people at the time, took this, right? They really did believe that the theater could sort of encourage people to go astray, right? To go away from God. Okay. Let's see. Haley, can you read the slide for us?
How is it possible that historical facts can differ? And definitely think about this one. I fact and quote, remember facts are in the eyes of the beholder, depends on the person, why it exists.
Mario, that's a good question. Mario asked, didn't they know that theater was to originally teach religion? Doesn't really matter to them at this time, right? Because that's not how it's being used. But that's a good question. Haley, are you here? Can you read the slide for us?
Theater doesn't really take off until after the Revolution. New York actors imported from London, some from America, Philadelphia, a combination of actors from abroad in America, and touring shows from New York, Mississippi River theater on boats going up and down the river, showboats. plays start off most British, but eventually American playwrights hit it big. The first is Royal Tyler's The Contrast.
Thank you so much. Okay, yeah. So after the revolution, things sort of settle down, right? And we start primarily off with theater in New York City and Philadelphia. Now, at this time, New York City is the capital, right? We haven't moved to, Washington yet. So it starts in New York City, really. And now that they've sort of established themselves as separate, it sort of becomes more okay to bring actors down from London, or over, I should say. Now, some were from America, some were American actors, right? But a lot of them were brought there. The next place for theater to go is Philadelphia. So some of it, again, starts in Philly, but a lot of these plays begin in New York City and then they tour actually to Philly or to Boston, right? It doesn't take very long, though, for as sort of, everything spreads to the West, for the people on the Mississippi River to discover that they could do these, showboats on the river. And basically, if you were traveling, you could travel while watching a show, right? So the showboats become pretty popular pretty quickly. Basically just, a theater, a stage on the water. So again, because, the revolution has just happened, they begin doing mostly British plays. But the longer this goes on, the, more we have real American playwrights. So the very first play that becomes, big, written by an American playwright, is The Contrast by Royal Tyler, and that is 2 L's in his name. You don't have to remember who he is, but I didn't want you to think it was a typo. Yeah, his name is Royal Tyler, The Contrast. The very first play, an American play that really sort of hit it big and then even toured overseas, is a play called The Indian Princess. And it is essentially the story of Pocahontas, right? And I'm sure you guys know that Disney's Pocahontas isn't really close to the story of the real Pocahontas, right? No response. Everyone knows that the real Pocahontas, her life was a lot different than what we actually saw in our sweet Disney version. But the Indian Princess kind of is basically the reason why stuff like that became popularized, this romantic, indigenous woman falls in love with a European settler, right? That romantic notion of that happening really comes from this play, or it was kind of like a musical because there were some musical numbers in it. But yeah, that's basically the first play that starts in America and then is so popular it goes overseas. Okay, so now we're going to talk about 2 actors, Edwin Forrest and William McCready, and something that happens between them that's called the Astor Place riots. Let me turn off my video because I know it'll help if I do that for this little. All right, let's see how this works. If I need to give you the link, let me know. Oh, and it didn't play. Hello.
On. And
I'm going to rewind it a little
bit
because we've got a little bit of time because I want you to get the full context of this.
Metamora opened at the same time as the Indian Removals Act. It made audiences cry, but it didn't make them oppose the persecution of indigenous peoples. Metamora isn't really about Native Americans, it's about white Americans wanting to believe in the dignity and naturalness and authenticity of the American character. The play wants to help define America as a nation, but a nation by and for white people. Forrest's main rival was William Charles Macready, a Scottish actor who preferred a subtler and more intellectual style of acting. In a tribute, the poet Tennyson called him moral, grave, sublime. On a visit to London in 1845, Forrest decided to play Macbeth, which is not a macho role, and it did not go well. Audiences hissed at him, and Forrest decided that Macready, the most famous Macbeth of the day, had put them up to it. Actually, Macready had been really supportive of Forrest, but Forrest was not the kind of guy to let logic stand in his way. So Forrest went to Edinburgh, where Macready was playing Hamlet, and he hissed at him during the performance. Rivalry on, and in the thought bubble. Forrest had support among street toughs and the working class in America. Macready's fans were upper-class Anglophiles, and the animosity between the two groups reflected a common tension at the time between the rich and the poor, between immigrants and nativists. A few years after those hissing incidents, Macready came to America for a tour, and Forrest's fans harassed him, once throwing half a dead sheep carcass at Macready while he was performing, which is sort of worse than a whole sheep carcass. In May of 1849, Macready was playing Macbeth at the Astor Place Theater. Forrest, who still hadn't figured out that he was just plain bad at Macbeth, was also playing him only a block away. Forrest's fans bought lots of tickets to Macready's performance and threw so many lemons and potatoes and rotten eggs on stage that it stopped the show. They also threw their own seats. Macready tried to leave for England, but a bunch of New Yorkers, including Herman Melville, signed a petition encouraging him to stay. 3 days later, Macready played Macbeth again, and that's when things went really wrong. Forrest's supporters were prevented from entering the theater by Macready's crew, so they surrounded it, throwing stones and trying to set it on fire. Macready had to sneak out in disguise, but the mob didn't disperse, and the state militia, called in by the police chief and the mayor, opened fire. More than 20 people were killed, and more than 100 were injured. Thank you, Thought Bubble. Bananas. Clearly, this is not a deadly riot about performance styles. It's about nativism, anti-immigrant sentiment spurred by economic inequality. But the Astor Place riots also show the anxieties that challenged theater in America, worries about who was allowed to produce theater and who was allowed to enjoy it. The Astor Place riots are upsetting, but the upset isn't over yet. We're staying in America for another episode exploring race, melodrama, and...
Okay, so here we have two completely different groups of people, right? Who are fighting, but what are they really fighting about? Like, what's the real, like, problem that's going on? Let me pull up a whiteboard so you guys can help me fill this out. So what's really going on? On the one side, we have Forrest, right? On the other side, we have, well, I can't see it, Macready. I can't, is that how, let me go back. There's an A in there, that's what I thought. Okay, so we have Forrest and we have Macready. So we have the Astor Place riots, but what is really the problem here? Okay, if you are a nativist, can you explain that, Zion? So whose supporters were nativists? Okay, so McCready is from where? Where is he from? Edinburgh, right? Where's Edinburgh? You're close. It's Scotland. Okay. So McCready's from Scotland. Forrest is from where? Where's Forrest from? Edwin Forrest is from? Come on, guys. Do I need to make a pop quiz? Because I will. I got time. He's actually from the United States, okay? He's a US actor. Okay. So who's the kind of people who support Forrest? Who are his supporters? Thank you, Navi. Okay, so they're Americans, but they're also what class of people? Yeah, they're more like the middle class, okay? Who supports McCready? Yeah, the upper class, right? All right, okay. So McCready comes to the US, right? And he's performing who? What character were they both performing? Macbeth, good. And Forrest supporters are the ones who cause, this problem, right? They start, booing and hissing and throwing stuff. And as a result, what happens? It starts a rivalry, okay? What specifically happens the night when he's in Astor Place? Yes, they're setting things on fire. And so the mayor calls in what? The militia? No, the mayor calls in the militia, and the militia opens fire on the people outside, the Forrest supporters. Okay. So what is this really about? Is this really about just these two guys and who plays Macbeth the best? No, it isn't. What's it really about? Okay, what do you mean by the people? Being a nativist or not? Okay, that's part of it. Okay, so it's partially about theater in America. It's about nativism. What else is it about? What's the third thing on our list here between Forrest and McCready? White colonialism, that's good. But it's also part of this tension between classes, right? This idea of we have this middle class or working class people and how they get access to theater, what their theater is like, right? So essentially, when they boo and go after McCready, they are the ones who get the militia called on them, right? The militia kills Forrest supporters. That's not what happened to McCready's supporters, right? So what does that sort of remind you of? No, this should be colonialism. That didn't work. Oh, well, that didn't work either. What does that remind you of? They call the militia on and shoot and kill Forrest supporters for what happens at the Astor Place Theater, but they don't do that in McCready, with McCready's. Okay, Zion, you're talking about with Euripides, yeah. I was also thinking like this idea that, right, they summon the militia on the middle and working class people, not the upper class, right? It's not super new, right? This idea of the people who don't have as much money or aren't as privileged are the ones who get, you know, shot down by the militia for doing the exact same thing that the upper class people did, right? Unfortunately, this has been something that's been right in our country since even before it was a country. All right, going back to oh, not that. Okay, so just to briefly touch on it, there's also a lot of racial tension during this time, or there will be shortly afterwards, right? One of the things that we often overlook when we're talking about theater history is the African Grove Theater. So we actually had fairly early on in American theater an early American all-Black theater troupe that mostly worked on showboats. We also have minstrel shows, stereotypical portrayals of Black people originally performed by white actors and later by Black actors. And then a little bit later in the 1920s, and we're going to talk about this a lot next week when we talk about the American musical, we have the Harlem Renaissance, which happened, of course, in the borough of Harlem in New York City, and is going to have a direct impact on how musicals develop in America and what musicals are like today, okay? So before you do your exit ticket, I want you to please promise me you are going to watch your play over the weekend, okay? That's your homework. And then take notes to bring with you to class on Tuesday, because we're going to work on drafts together on Tuesday, okay? So that's your homework. Bennett, are you here? I still need a play from you. I never received a play from you. Well, if you look at the assignment, it'll sort of tell you the kind of notes that you should be looking for, right? How you felt about the acting. You can talk about the costumes, the lighting. Okay, thank you, Bennett. So if you look at the assignment, you know, it'll sort of give you some hints about what kind of notes will probably be helpful for you to write your draft. Okay, thank you, Mario. So please do that over the weekend, okay? Bring those notes with you so that on Tuesday, when we do our draft day, everybody has something to work with. Because if you come to class on Tuesday with nothing, there's nothing I can do to help you write your paper and get a good score on it for the RPA paper, okay? Questions, concerns? If you don't have any questions, we can do the exit ticket. I should probably make sure that it's open because you know me, it usually isn't because I don't know what I'm doing any of the time. It should be open, so you can go ahead and do your exit ticket. If you have any questions about the paper, speak now. I will try to get back to you over the weekend. However, Sunday is my father's birthday, so I will not be available on Sunday.
So on the explain Mexican American War turn in kind of what you have on this. This is one just checking progress.
So please do your exit ticket. Once you've finished your exit ticket, you can go ahead and skedaddle. And I will talk to you next week, if not before, through email or in my office hours this afternoon if you need help.
And once you submit yours, you are working
Mario, yes, it was in that country, but it was not, that's not the name of it. So you can look at the early American theater slides too. Remember, those are in Schoology. All right, guys, I'm going to go ahead and close the room. So I will see you guys next week. Have a
Thank
good
you, Dr.
weekend.
Thank
You're
you,
welcome.
Dr. Ashley. See you on Monday.
Bye-bye, Mario.
Bye. Have a good weekend.
You too.